Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
Person will do anything to stay alive. So after they turned me, I decided to start over. Took his looker. Who are you?
I'm Vanessa Murray's daughter, from Elk River. You'd passed through 15 years ago.
Tell your mother she's mistaken.
She died 3 weeks ago.
How'd you find me?
The internet. I can go out during the day. Always wear sunscreen, SPF 1,000,000, avoided recess, but...
Let me see your teeth. Oy vey.
Told you.
She's definitely yours. What the hell am I supposed to do? Be a person. I'm not a person.
I don't have anyone. There's no one there.
What do you think this is? You think that I've got someplace that I can take you? Like the Bat Cave?
You're feeling a little conflicted. You can imagine how I feel. As a vampire who was also a teenager.
Find something that you and your kid connect on. Something you could do together.
Maybe we could go on a little trip.
Seeing a family member can be very therapeutic.
Just give me a taste.
This whole thing was a mistake.
What do you want from me?
Everything!
I don't have anything!
I'm not mad. I'm
Disappointed?
impressed.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 478. Releasing November 22 on Shudder is Blood Relatives, a horror comedy that stars Noah Segan as Francis, a 115-year-old Yiddish vampire whose nomad life roaming the backroads of America is altered when his unknown 15-year-old daughter suddenly appears. A vampire movie of surprising sweetness and charm without sacrificing its blood-dripped fangs, Blood Relatives also marks the latest film from director, writer, and actor Noah Segan, who I'm glad to say joins me now on the podcast. Noah, how are you today?
I am lovely. I'm honored to be. I really hope that I don't completely biff it since you've made it 400 plus episodes. I hope I'm not your last.
I'm sure it's going to be great. And it's really interesting watching Blood Relatives. I'm a father myself. I've got two boys, aged 10 and 7, and just reading up about the making of this film. You initially, the idea for a film came when you became a dad or were about to become a dad, and you can definitely see that in the film. The character of Francis is about a man, not a normal man, but a man growing into fatherhood. But I'm just curious, where did the vampire angle come into all of that? I mean, that's just a really interesting kind of elements added to the story of a father and a daughter.
Well, Matt, I'm sure you can relate, being a father, and anyone who knows anything about parenthood knows that the first thing that goes when you have a baby is sleep.
Yes.
I remember very vividly thinking to myself, I'm up late with the baby, and I'm burping the baby, and I'm feeding the baby, and I'm changing the baby. And I used to be up late, out, at film festivals, drinking with my friends, talking about what movies we just seen and celebrating each other's. And I think the sort of duality of both of those kind of vampire experiences, one that was very sort of kind of sexy and exciting and dynamic and cool, and the other one that was sort of kind of scary and really facing my own mortality when I sort of considered those two worlds, I really considered the vampire angle and thought that might be a way to talk about how I was feeling.
Another element that kind of comes up, I think, in a movie, especially with the whole vampire angle, is that of time. An immortal has all the time in the world because they're just that, immortal. As soon as a child comes into the equation, all of a sudden his time is zapped away from him. And I think when it comes to, mums or dads or what have you, that element of time becomes much more precious because the time that you have left for yourself is pretty much relegated to nothing because of the responsibilities you have for fatherhood. I'm sure time was something that was crucial to your character, and also to what you feel as well as a new father, kind of like the loss of it and just how precious is left.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, because it's every day your kid is different and your kid is changing, and often you feel like, and we talk about this in the movie because, even though Francis, my character, who's a vampire, he's not getting older. His daughter, who, is half a vampire, so she's sort of running on Blade rules. She's a day walker, so to speak. She's getting older. And that, is sort of how I feel. I don't know that, I don't know that I feel that much different than I felt when I was 20. I mean, my back is kind of bad and, I kind of, I'm a bit heavier and, I can't drink as much as I used to, but, I still think of myself as a young person, but then I look at my kids and it's like every day they're a different person, and so again, that, yes, absolutely. That mortality and that kind of concept is sort of like, who am I now? Who was I then? How do I reconcile the two? All of that kind of was very valuable to, from the vampire angle, because it's how I was feeling in real life.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon. The world's leading online store, Amazon is your first stop to buy a wide range of products at competitive prices with fast delivery times. Amazon is also a world-class entertainment hub that includes Prime Video, Audible, Twitch, Amazon Music, and more. Sign up with Amazon today and experience the best in online shopping and entertainment. Please support Matt's Movie Reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below.
Another interesting element to the movie is something I don't think I've seen in other vampire movies, and that is, in this case, the character of Francis is a Jewish vampire. And what's really interesting about that is vampire culture, vampire lore, especially when it deals with religious iconography, really does tend more towards kind of like the Christian angle of things. The crucifix, for example, is such an incredibly important part of vampire kind of like imagery. And I'm just curious, when it comes to creating a Jewish vampire, when it comes to the religious aspects of that, can Francis, for example, go into a synagogue? Is there any type of elements from his own religion or cultural background that he cannot participate in anymore because now he's a vampire? Or do those kind of rules and customs in regards to theology and religion and spiritual life count in your world of vampirism?
Wow, well, that's man, that is an incredible question. Thank you for that. I mean, there's a lot to speak to. One of the things that I kind of found myself discovering as I was writing it was absolutely that question, sort of how does, this sort of classic, often Catholic-based or Christian-based monster, how do we couch that in my culture, my heritage? I'm very assimilated, but I'm a Jew, and how do I reconcile, that? And I realized, well, there's a long history of anti-Semitism and vampirism being conflated. And so I thought, well, okay, that's a really good thing to talk about. It's a really valuable kind of angle. And so that's kind of where that sort of stemmed from. And then as far as sort of how that relates to Francis's rules, there's a lot in there that's sort of conventional vampire rules, right? He goes outside and it burns his skin, and he's got fangs, and he drinks blood, and he doesn't show up in reflections in mirrors and that sort of thing. But then he also is always constantly asking to be let in, right? He's asking, can I come in? He needs an invitation, which is a classic vampire rule, but we never find out what happens if he isn't let in. And I've always thought it's because, there's a little bit of Jewish neuroses there. He doesn't want to find out. He knows all these other rules are true. He doesn't want to find out if that one is true. And so maybe that sort of extends to whether or not he would decide to go to shul on Shabbat.
I wanted to talk about the character of Jane, played by Victoria Morales. She's just absolutely fantastic in the role. And it's such a touching story between father and daughter throughout the film. Unconventional, but incredibly touching and charming. Finding Victoria for the role of Jane, did you know of Victoria beforehand? How did you find her, and how did you know that she would be the one to play Francis's daughter in this movie?
Well, I met Vic through our producer, Josh Rubin, who is also an incredible filmmaker. He made Scare Me, Werewolves Within, and he also plays a very fun role in this movie. And he had worked as an actor on his friend's film Plan B, which starred Victoria. And when we started talking about who would be a good Jane, he immediately mentioned Victoria, and I ran out. I watched Plan B. I watched her other work, and she was gracious enough to read the script and talk to me. And the minute that we got to know each other, it was just one of those situations where you have the same sense of humor, you have the same kind of work ethic. You kind of realize that, even over Zoom or a phone call, you can really connect with somebody. And we were just together ever since then. And that was still mid-pandemic. It took many, many months to actually start shooting the movie. And thankfully, Vic stayed on with us, and we actually met in person only about 48 hours before we started shooting the movie.
It's interesting, Dad, because I have talked to filmmakers over the last year about filming in COVID conditions, and that's been a really kind of regular occurrence where many Zoom meetings, but usually maybe a day or two before they meet on set. It's the first time they have met in person. I'm sure when that happens, it's such a different kind of vibe between both yourself and Jane at that moment, isn't it?
It was, but I will say it was incredibly reassuring. And of course, I'm sure that not everybody has this experience. It could go the other way, but I think that we had talked a lot, and there was a certain shorthand that we had, especially over the script, of course, and then just over sort of how we wanted to work together. That the real question was whether, when we met, we were going to have that sort of that chemistry that you need, and I knew that she was very professional and incredibly skilled and talented. So I already knew that she was going to be able to pull off the role. The question was really, are we going to have that sort of extra special X factor? And thankfully, we did. And I think, in retrospect, that was a big part of what Josh felt just in the one day that they had worked together. And that's kind of how he knew, wait, this is the right person.
Last question here. Blood Relatives is most definitely like your baby. Like, you direct, you write, you produce, you star in it. I'm curious though, when you first started writing the script for this movie, was that initially the plan that you would take on all of these hats, or is that just the nature of doing independent film, where you found yourself, saying, I know the material, I know this character, I think I can pull all of it off. How did that all kind of come about that you were the man to wear so many hats on this in this one movie?
Well, it was definitely the what was it? The latter, not the former. Except yes. I didn't know that I could pull it off. I was lucky enough that I was able to build a group of colleagues and collaborators kind of based off of the script, and people all agreeing that the script might make a good movie and kind of getting on board because of that. And so I just kept on sort of trying to kind of, beat that drum, keep thinking about the script. And if I can kind of keep people on track with, the pages that we like, then, maybe they'll show up again the next day. And so that's sort of, I think, how I ended up, producing it, how I ended up directing it, and then, kind of by default acting in it, because I just, I saw all of these people working so hard and in agreement that I really wanted them to stay in that zone. I really selfishly wanted them to keep showing up. And so I thought if I just kept on trying to do as many jobs as I could, it was less of a chance that people who were doing jobs I couldn't do would quit,
Well, I got to say, it's a wonderful film. It really is. And for everyone out there listening, Blood Relatives, November 22 on Shudder. It's a charming movie. It's a fantastically fun movie. I found it incredibly entertaining in its humor, in its imagery, in its style. I love the style of Francis throughout the film. I know some people make fun of him, call him the Fonz and stuff, but I don't know. It must be the Happy Days fan in me. I really dug it. So I got to say, Noah, congratulations to you on the film. Best of luck with the film's release. And yeah, hopefully we can talk again in the future. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again today.
It's been my pleasure, Matt. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate not just talking to you as a colleague, but as another parent. I appreciate it. It's always nice to hear those stories. So thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.